Okay, welcome to session 13, part E. And this, all I'm going to do is go over the midterm, give you the answers. Start off with the median and mean were both about a 64 on this. So this is a little worse than I had expected. A little disappointed in how well you did. Uh, Perhaps it was that I made a harder exam. I didn't think so. Um, but despite that, I am going to curve the grades. So I think you probably have already received an email. I'm going to add 10 points to everyone's score. Now, given that, this is pretty generous. About 20% of you made 87 or higher. So I'm going to add 10 points to that. So, by the way, the highest score is a 99. So that person is now going to have 109. And about 20% of you scored 87 or better. So I'm going to add 10 to that. That's a 97. That's an A plus or very close to it. That's a 20% of the class will now have an A plus after the midterm. That's pretty darn generous, I think. On the other hand, there's some, I would estimate something like a quarter to one third of you are not watching all the videos. I would estimate how many of you watched at least half the videos, and yeah, I would say it's definitely not the entire class, and I would say something like one third of you, maybe it's a little lower, but something like one third of you have watched less than half of the videos. That's a pretty poor job. You don't even need to read the textbook if you're just trying to get a C, But if you just watch all the videos and watch them carefully, one thing that students a decade and a half ago or 2 decades ago didn't have to worry about. They didn't have smartphones. And I think that has really hurt concentration levels. Everyone is holding always with having the cell phone in their hands, always looking, and they need this constant stimulation. And I see it with students um, who sometimes can't just focus their mind for an hour and 15 minutes on just one topic without having to be interruption. Look at the cell phone, look at the cell phone, look at the cell phone. Try to look at this. So it's only like 3 hours a week. That's all you got to do. Watch 3 hours a week. Put away the cell phone, put away all the other distractions, just concentrate on the videos. If it's hard to do that, just take notes. Sometimes if you just throw away the notes right after you watch the video, that you don't need them. The key is though that the note taking helps concentrate, helps you to focus everything on that video. And if you can do that 3 hours a week, I think that's about all it will take to get a C in this course, and probably even a B. So please try to do that. And by the way, if you're not willing, if you can't do 3 hours of uninterrupted, complete focus on a class, you shouldn't be taking that class. You're saying, oh, but I have to work or I have these other time commitments. Well, if that's true, take the class a different semester. Put more effort into working and maybe save up some money and then later take the class when you can devote at least, if it's a 3 unit class, you should be able to devote at least 9 units, and all I'm asking is something like three. Okay, and I don't think all of you are doing that. Okay, let me now go over some of the questions. Okay, and I'll give you the answers. So first, just about everyone got this. This is good. Who's the father of economics? Published a book in 1776. Adam Smith. Okay, and that was the practice question. A lot of you got that because of that, so that's good. The authors of your textbook argue that in order to make traffic run orderly on freeways, there should be a centralized government organization that tells drivers which lane they should drive in. The authors of your textbook argued the exact opposite. of that. They gave an example, an argument that's like the invisible hand, that sometimes in economics, everyone just pursuing their own self-interest works to further the public good. And I actually gave an example on this with my videos. So you should have gotten that. So the answer is false. Suppose a would-be bride discovered that her fiance is cheating on her. First, she decides to cancel the wedding, but then she thinks, "I've already spent $10,000 on a non-refundable deposit. Be ashamed to waste all that money. Maybe I should proceed with the wedding." Her thinking is an example of the XY fallacy, sunk cost fallacy. By the way, that was in the textbook, and it was also something I explained in my own video. You're required to watch a video in which the economist Milton Friedman explains how no one in the world knows how to make a pencil. Okay, this was the YouTube video that I posted on Dropbox. It's called iPencil. It's only about a 3-minute video. And trust me, with a lot of you, it is clear you did not watch that video. Now, some of you said, "What? I did watch the video, but you didn't. A lot of you didn't convey information that showed it." There's some students think, "Oh, I can just rephrase words that were already in the question, and that can fool the professor." Okay, we're not fooled. We were all students once ourselves. The key is to get this correct, to get all 5 points. You had to notice that Milton Friedman talked about. He said, "Look, there's basically 4 main products in a pencil, or 5. It's the wood, the erasers, the lead, the brass ring that goes around the eraser, and the paint." And he said, "Now, even if you knew how to produce all those things, you knew where to buy them, and you knew how to construct those things into a pencil, very few people know how to make those things." So to make the wood, you think, well, all you gotta do is saw down a tree, but take that one step further. How do you make the saw to chop down the tree, or to cut the tree down? Okay, how do you feed all the lumberjacks that are going to cut down the tree? So there's things like, you have to know how to make the coffee and produce the and the food that the lumberjacks are eating. You have to know how to get the steel to make the saws. So there's these products to make the pencil. You can do that one step further. There are products to make the products to make the products to make the product, and you can keep going toward an ad infinitum. Okay, you can keep on doing this. There's so many second and third and fourth and fifth, sixth, seventh, many more orders, and there's no one, once you get past 2 or 3 orders, no one's going to know how to make all those goods. And that was the point that Milton Friedman was making. But with the market, you don't have to know all that. There's other people who'll know that. We have division of labor, division of information, and that's the key to that question. Okay. This economic concept, question 5. Even if all people only pursue their narrow self-interests, blah, blah, blah. What's the name of the concept? An invisible hand. Okay. Remember, Adam Smith was the one who talked about that. Turns out that's not in your textbook, but this was in the video, and I think I discussed it at least twice. By the way, I wrote an email to my friend Pete Betke, one of the authors of the textbook. I said, "How can you not mention the invisible hand?" He said, "Oh, you're right. The next edition it will." Okay. Suppose the nominal interest rate is 12%, while inflation is 5%. So this was one thing I put in a video, and this was in the textbook, and this is something all educated people should know. All people who go to college should know what a nominal and a real interest rate. And the key is the real interest rate just equals the nominal rate minus the inflation rate. Okay, and I said that in the video. Gosh, everyone should know it was in the textbook. So, by the way, nominal rate, that's what's the rate that's reported in the newspaper. That's what the bank tells you. To compute the real interest rate, you just have to do this subtraction. Despite that, a lot of people did not get that, and you should have. You're not watching the videos, you're not reading the chapter if you missed that one. Okay, most economists emphasize the incentive role of prices. The economist Friedrich Hayek is well known for emphasizing another role of prices, the informational role. Okay, that there's information in prices. Okay, one, prices give incentives, but another important thing about prices is they give them information, and this was uh, part of that candy bar example, the fable of the candy bar, and I'll talk about that in a second. But that was the point that the manufacturer of the candy bar could do things, wouldn't have to even know all these steps. If there was even a war in the Middle East, could just know by prices and could end up acting as if he or she was perfectly informed about things like a war in the Middle East, all through prices. Okay. For any good, suppose Mexico can produce it more cheaply than the U.S. can. True or false? The U.S. is better off if it places restrictions on trade. So the answer is false. Although I think I wrote no. So that's a key. Is that um, that's the key part of the law of comparative advantage. Even if one country is better at everything than another country, they can still, both of them can still be made better off by trading. Okay. Consider the following baseball manufacturing business. It faces a fixed cost of 10 for each baseball. Manufacturers must pay an additional cost of 1. That's produced 1 baseball. The costs are 11. To produce 2 baseball, its costs are 12. So here's the key. So if number of baseballs in your total cost. So if you produce 1 baseball, what did I say? Your total cost is 11. It's your fixed cost plus that additional cost of 1. It's going to be 11. Just 2 baseballs is 12. 3 baseballs, 13, and so on. If the manufacturer produces 10 baseballs, what is its marginal cost? Well, number 10, we're going to have the total cost is going to be 20. We keep going. The manufacturer 11 will be 21. The marginal cost is how much does it cost to produce 1 more unit? Okay, everyone should know that. That's an important concept in economics. Marginal cost. It's the extra cost for making 1 more additional unit. Okay, the answer is $1 in this. Okay, each extra baseball costs 1 more dollar. So that means the marginal cost is $1. If you didn't see a video, I said there's a similar concept with marginal tax rates. How much taxes, if you earn 1 extra dollar, what percent of that dollar are you going to have to pay in taxes? We call that the marginal tax rate. That's an important concept. If you're going to take economics, you got to know what that word means. Okay, so the answer to that question was 1. Marginal cost is $1. For the above problem, where the manufacturer continues to produce 10 baseballs, what is its average cost? Well, its total cost is 20, and then average cost just equals total cost divided by quantity. And so that's going to be 20 divided by 10 equals $2. Okay, so that was number 10. Number 11, suppose a new medical study reveals that there are huge health benefits to playing tennis. What will this do to the supply and demand of tennis balls? Okay, this doesn't affect manufacturing in any way, but this affects what consumers do. Because the health benefits go up, people want to consume more tennis, and they need more tennis balls if they're going to consume more tennis. So that means the demand curve is going to be more. So in this case, the demand curve is going to shift outward. Number 12, okay, consider the above graph. Let me reproduce that graph here. So it looks like this. We have a price, quantity, demand, supply, and we had P2, where the equilibrium or market clearing price. We said, suppose there's a price ceiling of P1. And so P1 is here. So this is the price ceiling. At that price ceiling, so the government sets a price. That's where it's going to be. The suppliers and demanders can't pay above it. So at that price, the amount demanded, as the graph shows, will be 80,000. Okay, that's how many. I didn't even say what the good was, but whatever the good was, that's the quantity people are going to want. The quantity people are going to supply. So you look on the supply curve, you look where the P1 crosses the supply curve. This is how much is supplied, and the answer is 50,000. The shortage is just the difference in those two numbers. How much the demand is greater than supply. So the answer is 30,000. Okay. In a certain region, the demand for burritos is as follows. Demand of 10 equals 1. I said, for instance, D of 8 equals 3 means that if the price is 8, then people will demand 3 burritos. Monopolist sets price equal to 7. What is his or her revenue? Okay. So that means price gave you equals 7. And so what is quantity? Well, I gave you, it's the demand when the price is 7, and that equals 5. And so the final answer, revenue, and you should have known this from the video from my textbook, revenue just equals price times quantity, and that equals 7 times 5 equals 35. So that will be the revenue. Okay. Describe what your professor calls the fable of the candy bar. Begin your description. A war breaks out in the Middle East. In your description by describing how this causes a candy bar manufacturer to change the ingredients in the candy bar. Okay. So as I told you, this is how it goes. A war breaks out in the Middle East. This causes the price of oil to go up. Okay. When the price of oil goes up, this makes gasoline manufacturers or gas stations to want to use more ethanol. Okay. So all of a sudden, the demand for ethanol goes up. And part of ethanol is made with corn. So that causes the demand for corn to go up, causes the price of corn to go up. This causes the price of corn syrup to go up. Price of corn syrup goes up. Candy bar manufacturers realize, oh, I'm going to demand less of corn syrup. I can switch to sugar, which is a substitute for corn syrup. So the answer is, in the end, the candy bar manufacturers are going to order more sugar. Okay, so that, I think, is a good example. I got this from another textbook. Is actually a textbook by two other George Mason professors, Alex Tabarrok and Tyler Cowen. I think it's a beautiful example. And it's something that once you think about it, you think, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But you might not think about it at first, to think how oil can cause a candy bar manufacturer to order more sugar. To get that, lots of you, we gave a little bit of partial credit, but to get full credit for that, you had to mention the word corn. Okay, you had to understand the way I explained it, and depending on how generous we were, I think you should have had to mention ethanol and corn syrup to get full credit for that. Okay, so that was question 14. Question 15. The U.S. devotes all its resources. Okay, we have a few questions on this. Okay. Okay. The U.S. devotes all. So here's the production technology. So the U.S. can make, if it wants, if it devotes all of its time to making cars, it can make 24 cars. Let's see, 24 cars, or it can make 48 hockey pucks. Okay, that's in an hour. Okay, Canada, if it devotes all of its resources to cars, it can make 6 cars, or it can make 36 hockey pucks. Okay, so that's the production technology. Okay, true or false? The U.S. has an absolute advantage over Canada in making hockey pucks. The answer is yes. It does have an absolute advantage. In fact, in both goods, it has an absolute advantage. It can do better at both goods. So the answer is true. It has an absolute advantage over hockey pucks. Okay. Okay. Question 16. If the U.S. devotes for the above situation, same thing, which country, if either, has a comparative advantage, or which country, if any, has a comparative advantage at making hockey pucks? A comparative advantage. Okay. So uh, the book gave you one way to try to learn who has the comparative advantage. I gave you another. If you go back to my video, the key is said, well, if there's one, if they split who has the absolute advantage, then it's easy. Okay, this is not the case here. The U.S. has the absolute advantage in both, so that makes it a hard problem. When it's the hard problem, what you have to do is you have to look at the country which is disadvantaged. So in this case, it's Canada, and you say, which country is it almost as good as the other country? In which good is it almost as good as the other country? And to define almost, you have to do a division problem. And so the answer is, for hockey pucks, it's 36/48. It's 3/4. For cars, it's 6/24. That's 1/4. So that's higher. Okay. So that means it's almost, I'll put that in quotes, it's almost as good as the U.S. at hockey pucks, but not almost as good at cars. So that means Canada, they're almost as good as hockey pucks. Canada has a comparative advantage in hockey pucks. The U.S. has the comparative advantage in the other good, cars. So the answer to this problem is that Canada has the comparative advantage at hockey pucks. Which country? The answer is Canada. Okay. Suppose the U.S. produces 12 cars per hour. Okay. So I'm going to call this original consumption and production. Okay. In the U.S. and Canada. So we're going to set it up originally it's this way. The U.S. produces and consumes 12 cars per hour and 24 hockey pucks. 12 cars, 24 hockey pucks. And the way this works, so if you look at it, so it could produce 24 cars an hour or 48. So it looks like it's devoting half of its resources to cars and the other half to hockey pucks. Okay. That would give it 12 cars and 24 hockey pucks. Okay, meanwhile, suppose Canada produces and consumes 3 cars and 18 hockey pucks. Okay, so Canada's doing the same thing. Um, it's devoting half of its resources to cars, 3 is half of 6, and half of its resources to hockey pucks, 18 is half of 36. Okay, this was okay. Can you specify new production amounts in a way to trade so that each country consumes more of both goods? Okay, we gave you 2 points if you just said yes. Okay, is there a way that they can trade? And then we give maybe one more point if you say, well, if each country concentrates more on the good for which it has a comparative advantage, and then they trade, they can both become better off. Okay, that should have gotten you about 3 points. To get the full 5 points, though, you have to be precise and actually come up with numbers to say, here's a new production technology, here's a new consumption, here's a way to trade that would make both better off. Okay, now this is a hard problem. This may have been the hardest problem on the exam. Here's the way I would do it. You have to. That's why you needed scratch paper, and it sometimes just takes a bit of time to try this. Here's what I would have done. I would have said, let's start off with green. I'm going to say, let's try to make the U.S. focus more on its comparative advantage, which is cars. Instead of making it half and half, let's make it 2/3 on cars, 1/3 on hockey pucks. So let's say the U.S. produces 2/3 of its top resources on cars. 2/3 of 24 is 16. So they can produce 16 cars. So 1/3 of hockey pucks. 1/3 of 48 is 16. And then Canada, let's make it do the opposite. Let's make it spend 1/3 of its resources on cars, 2/3 on hockey pucks. 1/3, if it produces 1/3 of its resources on cars, it can produce 2 cars. And it can produce, if it's 2/3 on hockey pucks, it can produce 24 hockey pucks. Okay. Now, we've got to trade, okay, so that both are better off, okay? So notice now the U.S. is producing 16 hockey pucks, but before it produced 24. We've got to trade to make the U.S. get up to more than 24, okay? The problem is Canada is only 6 more than it was, so it can't give away more than 6. The most it can give away is 6. That would get that number up to 22, and so the U.S. would not be producing as many hockey pucks as before. In fact, another way to look at this, the total hockey pucks is 40, whereas before it was 42. So there's no way to make both of them have more hockey pucks than before. So I try to guess. This was my first attempt at a guess, and it doesn't work. Another guess would be, okay, I'm going to keep U.S. the same, producing it devotes 1/3 again on cars, 2/3 on hockey pucks. Let's make Canada go to it spends all of its resources on hockey pucks, 0 on cars. So this I'm going to use the red to represent the second attempt, my second guess. So if it does this, Canada now produces 0 cars, and it will spends 100% of its time on hockey pucks, so it can produce 36 hockey pucks. That'll give us a total of 52 hockey pucks. And the good thing, the total number of cars is 16, and before it was 15. So we're in good shape. We're producing more total cars and more total hockey pucks. The final aspect is just to trade, trade so that the U.S. is consuming strictly more cars and hockey pucks than before, and so is Canada. Okay, the way to do that, first we need to make Canada gives some of its hockey pucks to the U.S. U.S. needs at least 9. So let's say Canada give 9 hockey pucks to the U.S. Once they do that, so I'll write them in blue, what happens. So once they've given 9, that becomes 27, and that number becomes 25. So good. Both the U.S. is consuming more hockey pucks before, and Canada is also consuming more hockey pucks than before. Now let's make sure they're both consuming more cars than before. So the key is tell the U.S. give, let's see, let's make it 3.5 cars. Once we do that, the U.S. will be consuming 16 minus 3.5 is 12.5. Canada goes from 0 to 3.5. And the key is they're both consuming more cars than before. So this one works. If you do this, new production, the trade, you can make it so that both countries are consuming strictly more of both goods than they were before. Okay, so that was number 17. Number 18. Okay. Suppose on a whim that Congress mandates, erase this. Okay. Suppose on a whim that Congress mandates that the price of a gallon of gasoline must increase from $3 a gallon to $3.30. Okay. Suppose that when this happens, quantity changes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, given this information, what is the elasticity of demand? So, key is elasticity. You had to memorize this formula. Elasticity equals percent change in quantity divided by percent change in price. Okay, so to answer that, we first have to compute the percent change in quantity. And the question tells you, when this happens, the quantity demanded changes from 2 to 1.9. So the change, so it changes from 2 to 1.9. It changes by 0.1, but the percent was it went from a base of 2, so the percent change just equals that. And that equals 0.05, so that equals 5% change, okay? Meanwhile, what's the price change? The price change, it goes from $3 a gallon to $3.30. So the price changes by 0.3 of a dollar, or so 30 cents. And you divide that by the base, which is 3, so that equals 0.1, which equals 10%. Okay, so the final part, to get the elasticity, it's going to equal 5% divided by 10%, and that equals just 0.5. Okay. It's actually, in the change in quantity was negative, so it's actually negative 0.5. Okay. So that is the correct answer to 18. Okay. Now, final question. Suppose that for the above problem, instead of using gallons and dollars, use quarts and pennies, okay, so on, okay. This was a bit of a trick question, and I wanted it to be hard. I actually wanted this to be the hardest question on the exam. It was not. You could have gotten it without thinking the following aspect, but let me explain what I wanted you to learn from this question. Okay. me go back. First, let me give an example. There's an old movie called This is Spinal Tap. I hope some of you have seen this. If not, go to YouTube and look up This is Spinal Tap. In fact, type in These Go to 11. Okay, the movie's about this heavy metal rock band during the 80s, and at one point they have this scene where the documentary maker is interviewing the lead guitarist. And the lead guitarist is showing the special amplifier, and it's special because the numbers, the volume of the amplifier goes up to 11, and most amplifiers only go up to 10. And so the documentary maker, does that mean it's louder? And the lead guitarist says, well, yes, it's one louder. Yes, most amps go up to 11, will go up to 10. This goes up to 11. And the joke is that he's not talking about the units, okay? That 11 versus 10, you need a unit somehow. It's 11 decibels versus 10, or there's some units, okay? It would be like saying, if I'm 5'10", my wife is 5'4", you would say, I'm 6 taller. I'm 6 inches taller. It doesn't make sense if you don't give the units, okay? And so now, and that's what the joke is in that movie. Now, if you think back to when you took chemistry or physics classes, usually when you got the answer right, you had to put in the units, the meters or centimeters or kilograms or something, And the key is you had to keep track of these things when you're giving your answers, okay? Now, the thing about an elasticity that I want you to see is that it actually is unitless, okay? It's just a percent, and a percent doesn't have any units like kilograms or decibels or seconds, okay? It's just a unit. It's just a number. And the key is you can see this. So first off, we looked at the change in quantity, okay? If the change went from, at first, we said the example was, it went from 2 million gallons to 1.9 gallons, okay? So the change was 0.1 gallons, but the base was 2 gallons. And you remember from physics, we're dividing, the units cancel each other out. It's gallons divided by gallons. So in the answer, we don't have gallons. It's just a number, 5%. Okay? And so the same thing, if instead we had talked about liters or quarts, it doesn't matter. Whatever unit we use would cancel each other out. Okay? And we had a percent divided by a percent, and this percentage is going to be, here again, it's going to be change in dollars divided by dollars. The dollars are going to cancel each other out. So if instead we had used yen or pesos or cents, whatever unit of money is going to cancel each other out. So it's going to be a percentage divided by a percentage. Both of those percentages are unitless, so it won't matter how we change our units. That's the key about an elasticity. It has no units. So the answer would be that it doesn't matter how you change the units. The elasticity is going to remain at negative 0.5, no matter what new units you use. Okay, so that was the answer to question 19. Hopefully everyone understands the test now. It's a good chance I could ask one of these questions again on the final, so make sure you understand these things. If you don't, send me an email. Perhaps we can do a Zoom call. Maybe I can answer it by email, whatever it takes. But I want you to understand these questions and why these are the correct answers. Okay, so that is part E. See you in a few days for the next session.